G'day and welcome to the latest episode of Vantage Point, where we're joined by Hugh Robertson of Morgans. A bit of a change of tact from management and companies, where we dive into the stockbroking world, his history of backing companies, early days of Afterpay, Bellamy's, SKS and the like, and what's next in 2026 and his key picks. We hope you enjoy. Thanks. Hugh, thank you very much for joining us. It's had a couple of years in the industry. Maybe 20 or 30 or 40 plus.
40 plus, yes, depressing, isn't it?
How have you sort of looked at, certainly over the journey, how it's changed to where we are today? Obviously technology's played a big hand, but stockbroking isn't what it once was.
No, it's actually from going back into the depths of time, it's become increasingly more inefficient. So stockbroking has gone the opposite way to the rest of the world. So without dwelling, say 30, 40 years ago, lots of small companies were covered by the market. As the broking firms have been swallowed either by Bell or Canaccord, or have gone bust, what's happened is fewer and fewer stocks are covered, and everybody is concentrating in the top 50, top 100, and anything outside of that is lucky to be covered at all. So from my point of view, not being remotely interested in the 50, the 100 probably, that is nirvana, because you find things that other people never look at.
And in terms of you, obviously, if you're not looking at the 50 or 100, you're definitely a stock picker and a risk taker. How do you sort of go about finding companies? Is it going on trips and the rest of it? And I've heard Matthew Kidman's podcast where he talked about back in the 90s, going to Perth and finding the likes of Monadelphous and whatnot, that no one was really doing those trips back then, whereas nowadays it's a dime a dozen. How do you sort of find the diamonds in the rough?
Well, the very best diamonds actually are the ones who don't really seek to be found. So you're right, everybody does the trips through the various cities, even Adelaide. But they really tend to go to the ones that want to be seen, that want to tell their story. Quite often the very best ones don't. They're quite understated, and in some cases refuse to actually talk to stockbrokers, which probably a good sign, actually. So people are very quick to judge, and they have views about various companies that, SKS, which is one that we've followed, well, it's run by a family, they dominate it. There are more jinx, the main family, on the register than there are anybody else. There are certainly more jinx on the board than there are anybody else. And then lots of people will say, well, that's a no-no. So Monadelphous was a bit the same. It was dominated by basically the Sicilian diaspora. And of course the Terrace, St George's Terrace, thought, oh, no, not a member of the World Club. So they tended to look over Monadelphous, which effectively ended up by wiping the floor with their competition. And SKS, I don't think it's so much a case of wipe the floor, but they're tough, hard Western suburbs operators, a bit like Joe Bartolo at Simmel. They value a dollar. They've probably got the first dollar they ever made, and they don't give it up lightly. So what I look for is people who treat every dollar as if it's gold. So that feeds back to the other reason that stockbrokers tend not to look at a lot of companies, is that if you're a stockbroker, traditionally you make all your money cynically out of capital raisings. And the problem with that is that capital raisings and capital appreciation of the stock tend not to necessarily go hand in hand. So the best ones in terms of performance are those that are very judicious in terms of their issuance of new equity. So that's what I do. So I go around, I look like again, stockbrokers are a bit inclined to claim all the successes and none of the failures, and I've had loads of failures. Some I find myself, many I am told about by other people. And there are various people who are very good at seeking out emerging companies. The dilemma is the companies in small caps, they divide into two. They divide into those that are small companies and will always be small companies. And that's charming, small-minded and stay small-minded. And then there are those who are small companies who have very big ambitions and the skills to deliver that. And they are the ones which, from a broker client perspective, are the ones to try and find.
And maybe just talk about your client base. In today's sort of stockbroking landscape, you're either institutional or retail. You're a sort of unique blend, and you've got a core group of clients that have been with you, I imagine, for decades now, across different families and whatnot. It comes with an added benefit of actually having investors that can take a long-term view, as opposed to just funds who might wake up and have a redemption, or wake up on the wrong side of the bed and sell. How valuable is it to have such a strong history of a client base, be able to back these small cap stories?
Oh, look, it's marvellous. The difference between funds managers I put in the bucket that you sort of have to have. I find them exasperating. I find them irritating. I find their lack of long-term patience infuriating. Their capacity to want, then dump. No wonder they've got a bad reputation. And if I was running a public company, the last people I would want on my register is a bunch of fund managers. So going to my private side, the private client side, look, they've been built up over many years, and they're hard, they're tough, they're demanding. They can make a fortune on an afterpay, or a Bellamy, or some of the good ones we've had. And they'll peremptorily say, thank you, well done. And then they will absolutely drill the shit out of you,
when
the ones that have gone wrong. And look, you can't get them all right. The key is to try and learn from the errors and mistakes. What did you get wrong? And it really always comes down to one thing. It comes down to a misjudgment of not so much the business. Sometimes, very tough businesses, people make great successes out of very tough businesses. It comes down to a fundamental mistake that I make in terms of judgment of the individual. And that's where I've done badly. I've done badly when I've either been, I believed in the bullshit coming from an optimist, and there are lots of optimists, or I believed in the bullshit coming from a crook, and there are a few of them, not many, or and this is we're all subject to this, and that is the most sinister, which is somebody who actually works out what your soft spot is, and appeals to either your ego or your interests, and gets under your skin. And I'm lucky because I've got an extremely tough wife who is women are generally speaking very good judges of character, and they're very good at saying they think you're being taken. But, I look back, and the ones I've got wrong, in hindsight, it was blindingly obvious what was going to go wrong. The ones that have gone well, they tend to do better than you ever think they're going to do. So, which is why I also hate takeovers, because it's sort of like a
unfinished business,
premature ejaculation, isn't it? you get this rush of so-called success with a takeover, and then you've got to find something else to replace it with, which is really hard.
And maybe if we zero in on the family affair, obviously you got Bridget, Catherine, Hugh, Hannah. You've got quite the team. How does that sort of go in terms of working with anyone is fun at the best of times and hard at the worst of times. How does that dynamic work?
Well, I'd be lying if I said it was not didn't have its issues at times, but they're all very competent in their own ways, and they all, they don't. In fact, they're better than me. Hugh is better in corporate finance than I will, or am. Catherine is tougher and has far more attention to detail in terms of dealing, and Hannah's been behind the newsletter that we do, and it works well. When people stay in their lanes, it doesn't matter whether they're family or non-family. It works well. I like working with family. I probably should have been Jewish, I do, and I'm not, but I do like working with family. Sometimes they've got to be tough discussions. Hugh and I was very rude to Hugh a couple of weeks ago.
I did hear that.
And mind you, he started it, but I think every father-son combo says that. But it does work really well. And I'm not dynastic, and I'm not looking at trying to create a sort of mini Murdoch sort of structure. It's just that my children and Bridget, we all, having been doing this for such a long time, our lives have been infiltrated by the customers and the corporate customers that we've dealt with. So Rubino at Monadelphous was a case in point. So whenever he came to Melbourne, more often than not, he would come and have dinner. And so the kids got to know him and the family, and we got to know him. So there's often a blur between clients and friendship, especially when you have been on the path with a company from a minnow who no one knows, no one's ever heard of, to something that is actually quite big.
And when we talk about, you've moved around a little bit over the 40 years.
Yes, I have a bit. And look, it's all been good. It's been, look, it took me 24 goes to get a job as a stockbroker to start with, which means that I'm always immensely sympathetic to people trying to get a job in our industry. The first firm I worked with went bust. I hastened to add after I left. And then I was involved in my own broking firm, but as part of a partnership that merged with Bell. I had 2 sessions with Bell, who I was very fond of Colin Bell and even Alistair Proven, the managing director. But, they change. Broking firms evolve. And so that's why, happy though I had been at Bell, why I moved to Morgans. And Morgans is they're Queenslanders, so from a sort of moral stroke ethical perspective, they're actually quite old-fashioned. Now, that's easy to be saying that in a pejorative sense. I don't mean it in a pejorative sense. They just have very well-rooted foundations, and the research is good. Although research in small caps, generally speaking, is not perhaps as powerful as it should be. Brokers are always hedging their bets with research in small caps in case they've got one of the bad ones I was referring to earlier. But they're nice people. They're decent human beings, and they let me do what I do. So I deal with some institutions. I prefer my private clients. I'm not allowed to deal because of the stupidity of the law. I'm not allowed to deal with people who are not sophisticated. So So whenever I'm in a taxi and the taxi says to me, "What do you recommend?" I say, "Well, how do I know that you don't work for ASIC?" And I can't tell you because I'd be breaking the law. So, but I have a lovely clientele. They're as difficult as all F. Christ, they're difficult. I say to them that the 10 major ones, I would love to have a dinner for them, but I couldn't work out which of the most difficult I would put on my right. But I learn a lot from them. You learn a lot from people who are a bit older, which is sadly becoming somewhat harder to get to with me now at 65. But you learn from people's experience, and they will have a view when you put something to them. So I always work on the basis that I've got 3 or 4 clients who are really good, and they've got really good judgment from a differing point of view. If all 4 of them say no to an idea, I know I've got a problem. If 2 of them say no, well, it's sort of odds, isn't it? But when all of them say yes, it's worth backing the truck up. So, and thankfully, though they have started to die off, we've been lucky enough in some cases to keep the next generation.
And one thing that I've always sort of wondered, in terms of, you talk about the Rubino family and whatnot, you obviously supported a number of companies over the journey, and they become clients in themselves in terms of, personally or the family. How do you sort of manage that on the other side, that you've supported them, in their company, and then they become a private client? How does the sort of relationship change there, if it does at all?
Look, I don't know. It's just that you do get to know these companies well. Generally speaking, I tell people, I like to think I tell them exactly what I think, not what I think they want to hear.
I think that's fair to say is true.
Well, sometimes it's landed me in enormously hot water, but you tell them what you think, and I am genuinely interested in people. The whole business is based upon people and based upon trying to get an understanding of what drives human beings, whether they be in running companies or managing money. And I don't envy people who've got lots of the stuff. I think life is pretty tough when you've got a great deal of money. I think it's nice to have enough. And of course, the problem with money is, what is enough? We all have a different view of that. I think, so if I look at PSC, which was an insurance broking business that we floated, which in turn rolled back to another company called OAMS, and I was close to the board of PSC and to the management of PSC, and I was very sorry to see it get taken over. But, there comes a time when the price becomes irresistible, and to give them their due, they got the English to pay a price that was irresistible for the company. But since then, 2 of the, Tony Robinson and John Dwyer, Tony was the managing director and John was one of the executive directors, have forged their own way with a business called COG, which was a completely unloved financial services business, trading at about 90 cents. They took a decent stake less than a year ago, joined the board, Tony as chair and John as a director, and the stock price is now $2 plus. Still probably, I think, probably cheap, but it just goes to show how the institutional market, who would not even touch a stock at one level, now that they know the people involved,
can't get enough of
it. And we consider it our duty ordained by God to find those stories, load the private clients in, and then say to the privates, well, you've got a choice. You can either sit and stay for the ride, which we think is good, or you can sell it to the wood duck fund managers as they come piling
when
in.
the momentum starts coming.
Once the momentum comes in. And then there are others, obviously, like Accusensus and so on, which are, beautifully run companies. They all tend to have a very similar thread. The golden thread, to go back to that famous legal case, is the golden thread is you've got the board speaking for a huge amount of the equity. So Accusensus is the same, where the founder is one of, if not the largest shareholder. And SKS, similar. PSC, similar. Monadelphous was similar. Lycopodium, similar. So there are lots similar. You've got lots and lots of cases where you know that the person running the shop is got more to gain, but conversely more to lose.
And you want to be invested alongside those.
And you want to be invested alongside them.
In terms of not necessarily troubled childs, but going in, you talk about going on board seats and whatnot. How satisfying is it to have something that has turned to shit, actually turn around and come out the other side?
Oh, it's superb. There's no question, and I it's superb. It's most companies are resuscitatable, if that's a word. Probably isn't. Can be resuscitated. It's a combination. Companies, if you think about it, are made up of people, money, and business. And fundamentally, the most important one is the people. If you've got the people, you can get the money, and the business can be tailored. When you resuscitate them, it's great. So Maggie Beer you raised, which I've just stepped off the board, that was heading for zero at 1 million miles an hour. And suddenly in the space of 2 months, the board structure changed, the share register changed, and it's now got a focus in terms of FMCG that it never had before. So I'm a shareholder. Normally when directors resign, what they don't tell you is that they sell all the shares immediately. They step off the board
because they can, without disclosing.
I can genuinely say that that's one where I've increased my stake. Hub 24, which was Investor First, which was it was in complete cluster, that business. That the board changed, a bit of discipline was put in, the broking firm was spun off, which I was part, and the hub business was allowed to flourish under very sound management. And the other one I'm involved with is Credit Clear. Well, Credit Clear's had an up and down run, but we've got one of the other diaspora of PSC, Paul Dwyer, who was the founder there, who's now the chair and about to emerge as the second largest shareholder. It's probably been a frustrating one, but the actual core business is very sound. It's a sound business, but it's taking time. It's the hardest thing in being an investor.
Patience.
Is patience. Yeah. And one thing you learn from grizzled old people, doesn't matter, they can be male or female, is they have, or even Alex Waislitz, who isn't quite grizzled, or he's relatively old, this capacity for patience. And you'll lose a lot more money by being impatient than you will make.
And in terms of going on boards, it's, a lot of people in the market will say, a stockbroker has a bit of a conflict of interest in terms of going on boards, whether it's capital raising or otherwise. You take a different view in terms of almost a stewardship of your investors' money. Why go on boards, and what value do you see that someone like yourself can provide?
Well, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily a good director, but one thing I can tell you, and that is the majority of boards of public companies are completely useless, and most of the people on the board are only there because they are desperately trying to earn a few quid in terms of directors' fees. So generally speaking, average quality I wouldn't employ most public company directors if I was absolutely desperate. So, and the way it works, public companies, is my cynical view, is the board will agree to an increase in management salaries, senior management, as long as they know that the quid pro quo is that they will get a lift in directors' fees. And you get directors who even charge for a tram ticket. Really. So I suppose I've taken the view that when the majority of small companies that we invest in, we go boots in. So we quite often end up, as a collective, the clientele collectively owning way north of 20%. And
which is rare in today's sort of broking society, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, if it goes well, of course,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the Christmas presents exactly pour through the door, but the unpleasant conversations tend to diminish. So when it goes well, it's fantastic. When it goes badly, it's diabolical. But what you can do is, as a representative of the proprietors sitting in a boardroom, you can make sure that the voice of the proprietors is heard. Now, generally speaking, with public company boards, the order is this, and that is the board looks after itself, then the board looks after management, sort of, and then they look after each other, and then somewhere, probably not on the planet, probably not in the galaxy, but somewhere out there in the ether, the interests of the shareholders are looked after. So occasionally I think public companies need a situation where the interests of the shareholders are represented to say, well, hey, the people who are the proprietors of this business want to have a say. Do I get it right? No, look, quite often, sadly, the companies are far better. They do far better when they step off the board, which is really depressing. But
because case in point, Hub, you jumped off at $4 and it's 90 odd now.
Absolutely. OAMPS, I got off and it got taken over. Maggie Beer, I volunteered to leave the board because it was time to go, but I'm probably more optimistic about Maggie Beer than I have been in the past. So it is hard when you are looking out there for directors to find somebody who will. I'm not saying they won't do a good job. They'll be great in terms of dotting and T crossing, and they'll read the board papers and they will attend every board meeting, but will they actually make the boat go faster?
And that's something that I've seen you and your team sort of, if it's not you going on the board, trying to help the board, whether it's with a new CFO, whether it's with a new board member that actually can be value add. I'm assuming you see that as part of your duty as well.
Well, yeah. Look, it goes partially back to that point that if we've identified a business that we think looks good, what can we do to help that business? Bearing in mind also, if they are growing fast, there are very few companies that can keep the management team they had when it was very little, and that management team can take it all the way up. So I can only think of a handful. Sort of Monos did it, Monodelphous did it. Afterpay did it. Afterpay, the management, the core drivers did not change. There are others, but very different skills. When you are running a $20 million, $50 million, $100 million company, very different skills when you're suddenly in senior school and you're running a $2 billion company. And I suppose PSC is the same. And then you've got the attacks from fund managers. This gives you some idea of how lunatic it is. the attacks on what is your attitude to modern slavery. Well, you've got, hello, you know, perhaps it's a question you've got. And what's your attitude regarding gender diversity? Now, it's great to have a board that is made up of it's important that there be women on the board and there are people who represent various interests sitting in the boardroom. But the basis of appointment should be the same as the basis of management appointment. It should be based on merit. But modern slavery, really.
And when we look at 2025 and review, obviously small caps had a bit of a renaissance for a short period. It fell away later in the year, but how do you sort of look at it, looking back now, and particularly the companies that are in your stable?
Look, results at the end of the day always speak for themselves. The risk, of course, there's only so long that CBA and CSL can keep going. That's the way I see it. You know, it's the marginal dollar being tipped in from superannuation. Is anybody going to make their fortune out of CBA or CSL? No. West Pharma is a marvellous business and Rob Scott has done a brilliant job, but I don't think anybody's going to make their fortune out of West Pharma. There still remains the opportunity further down where you will find companies that will outperform. The problem, of course, is if you do a capital raising into the institutional market, there is always turbulence. And that's the hard thing. But there will be the emerging companies. You know, I always think the true sign of success is when you go to a restaurant, which I like doing. I go to restaurants every day. That I'm sitting at a table, and the table next to me, they're talking about a company that we followed from day dot, and they suddenly have found at some august place like UBS as one of their top emerging picks. So I think there will be opportunities. There will be sectorially, I suspect, and this is going to sound, how do you say it without it sounding heartless? Security, everything to do with security over the next few years should be in the frame. Let's face it, in Victoria, there seems to be the new emerging employment class, which is villains and thieves. And then you've got other areas within the economy. And obviously you've got the electrical area and you've got the resource sector, which continues to be strong. So I think it'll be good. But, you know, it's going to be... and results at the end of the day are what drives value in a company.
And so if I throw some names at you in terms of the outlook for 2026, first off, you know, one of your babies, Vitrify.
Oh, look, it's still emerging. Is the technology great? Yes. Have we got the right people involved? Yes. Does it require patience? Yes. Do I remain optimistic? Yes. But we just have to wait. But you know, we've got all the bits are lined up for Vitrify.
You board in place of Dr. Lee Farrell.
Lee Farrell, he's impressive, and Brent Owens, the MD, is extraordinarily impressive in terms of his understanding of the business. Look, it is when you are coming up with a new solution, it takes time. Hey, I went through it with Hub. We had the new solution with Hub. We actually had to pay people to put money on the platform. We never told anybody that, but we had to pay people to put money on the platform because everybody thought, well, why would we use Hub? So they've just, the moment I think they get over the first hurdle and the first contracts, the rest will flow.
And Accusensus, again, you're very, very early there as well.
Very early there, being there from being a seed funder. I think he's one of the most impressive inventors and operators I've come across. He is He knows exactly where he's going. He's developing an international business. I think the camera business vis-a-vis speed and distracted driving is interesting. I think his products with regard to stopping roadside workers from being killed is potentially a multi-billion-dollar business.
And you've talked about Credit Clear a little bit, but obviously recent acquisition as well.
Credit Clear, I have to say this because I'm on the board. It's a bloody good business. And Australians and the English, in fact, nobody actually thinks they've got to pay the bills. And what's more, corporates are pretty slack at getting those bills paid. So I think it's a well-run business now. It's got myself excluded, it's got a good board.
And Paul
Dwyer
popped in a lot of money as well.
He's a very focused individual. Yeah. So it's gone from looking horrendously expensive to pretty cheap.
And reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, and they'll acquire more and more things, I suspect.
And one that many wouldn't have heard of, but you've conducted a couple of raids in the last sort of 6 months. Spectre. Well, Spectre is a good example. Spectre came to me talking about. It came to me via a bloke called Anton Middendorp, and people may have heard of middies. Yeah.
That ghastly pink.
Yeah, and pink and blue with a big M.
Perhaps you could go for a better colour. Anyway, look, it's a camera business for mobile phone towers and sharks, which I thought was interesting. That's big business in WA, and rock fishing and for factories and other areas as well. The managing director is possibly one of the most cerebral people I've come across. He's not what I would describe as a rampant salesman, but I actually quite like that. But they're good. It is a stock that, in my view, what a 3-odd cents, and I'm a reasonable shareholder, has got a fair bit of potential.
And we talked about Simmel and Joe Bartola.
Simmel, look, that is the best from the West. You make a lot more money out of the western side of Melbourne by investing, as you make more money out that way than you make out east.
Correct, yeah.
They'll probably steal it from you out east. Whereas if you can get on the right side of the ledger with a Joe or a Matthew Jinks, and they're very courteous, they're very tough, and gee, they know what they're doing.
I talked about Matthew Kidman's podcast with you back in June 24, and you picked SKS back then as one to perform. I think it was 75 cents, and now it's sort of $4. And he asked you about one unlisted one that you wanted to bring to market. That was almost 18 months ago now, and you talked about pay.com.au. You just conducted a pre-IPO for them. Again, you were one of the first backers there, so you got skin in the game. Talk to us about that.
Pay.com.au is a points platform, and even though I've never used points, I think I've used points once in my life.
Why haven't you used points?
Because
you can't operate it, or you're not tech savvy enough?
No, well, actually, it's the latter. I am a technological troglodyte, so I never used Afterpay. I wouldn't actually even know how to use Afterpay. I don't actually think that's the issue. I think the issue is if you observe people and you realise that the majority of people are obsessed by points. So we owned a bookshop. We worked out that lay-by was the worst thing possible, which is why simplistically we first backed Afterpay and its seed funding and then the IPO. In the case of Pay, I was flying overseas and because I was bored and I loved drinking, I went up to the bar and I worked out on the plane that I was the only wood duck who'd paid a seat. The other 8 blokes, and because of course they were all men there, who'd paid for a seat, all the others had used points. So points are, for a lot of people, an obsession. And
so it's a real way of gamifying, right?
a real way of
gamifying that. Yeah, everyone gets obsessed with. I've got to
Yeah.
use points. I've got to use
Yeah.
this card because it gives me the best points and loyalty and all the rest of it.
So it seems to me that using Qantas is limited.
Can't get a flight.
Well, I think what does it go? It must go the board first, the board first, management second, chairman's lounge, which I'm not a member of, next, and then the other. So, so this is a business that has transformed the use of points in terms of racking up 16 or 17 airlines. And they're good. They're tight. God, they're one of the tightest companies I've ever come across. Mean in terms of dealing with a broker. I always thought Anthony Eisen at Afterpay was tough with brokers. These blokes have taken it to a new level. But they're smart. They're intelligent. It's a business that lends itself to B2B, and they're very hard to find. B2B businesses, so that you can earn points by paying for your invoices through their platform. You pay them a fee, and we used it a few months ago. We went to South Africa because I thought, well, if we're going to back this, we probably should see if the bloody thing works, and it did. It did. And look, it's a well-run business. We would hope that it will come to list in the first half of next year. So. And Australians love a growth story. Heavens above, you're not going to get any growth out of those ones we talked about earlier.
I think the unique thing with Pay as well is that we're a small business as well, and a lot of fund managers are included, but it's very rare to have a product that actually delivers you value. For an SME, in terms of, you're basically paying everything anyway. Why not actually get a benefit from it? Particularly that you can actually use as opposed to Qantas, frequent flyer point, and the rest of it.
Well, you and I both know that everybody listening to this podcast, including you and I, we will die with Qantas frequent flyer points.
Yeah, that's
so
very true.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that will be tipped into our graves or burnt at the crematorium.
Probably the last question. You're still fighting strong. Any signs of finish line anytime yet, or you'll keep doing this until the day that you die?
Look, I'm a shit farmer. I hate golf. I detest bridge. And so I look at it's a nice life. You meet fascinating people, and that's the sheer diversity of the people I spend my life with. So look, at some stage I'll either die or get Alzheimer's. Although there is a history in stockbroking that you can have Alzheimer's and still be a stockbroker. I have known a few. But I think for the time being, I like doing what I do. I've got a very nice and able team around me who make up for my immense inadequacies, and I spend my life going out and looking for companies.
That's a pretty good way of doing it. I always remember my dad always said that the day that he stops working is the day that he'll die, and he worked until he was 89. So
well, I don't think I'll probably go that long, but and sometimes
maybe you'll still be investing and passionate about it, though. Yeah,
and there are when we did Monadelphous, I thought I'll never find another Monadelphous, and then we did Afterpay, and I thought, well, I'll never find another Afterpay, and now we've got Pay. And so I said to Bridget,
the chase continues.
Yeah, I said to Bridget, we'll never find another one. And she said, well, you never know.
That's the great game.
I know I will find another disaster. I will definitely find
they're always
another
just around the corner.
Absolutely.
Let's hope we steer clear of those in 26, and well done again, Hugh.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks very much.
Good day. Bye.